Hello, I'm Janos Vark. I'm the director of Supergirl.
And I'm Scott Michael Bosco, consultant for this special Anchor Bay DVD release, and welcome to the commentary.
Thank you.
Janot, this title sequence is very different from what was standardized in the Superman films. Were there different ways of approaching this to make it different?
Well, from the beginning, the concept of Supergirl was that it would stand on its own. It would really be trying to create a mythology which would be more emphasis on grace and on intelligence. And we did it like this. It is still a little bit similar, but it's not the same letters. The music is different. And then we did it against the background of skies and wind. It was Derek Meddick's magic again.
Now, is Jerry Goldsmith the first person approached for this?
Yes. I thought about him immediately. I've always admired him since the beginning, since his first score, which was a film called Sebastian. And I always wanted to work with him. And we approached him, and he liked the project. And we got along like a house on fire. We really had an immediate rapport, and it worked out very well.
Did you have any requests musically for him to fulfill?
What we did is, once the picture was finished, we ran it together and we discussed the concept, the overall tone of the music. It had to be lyrical, it had to be strong, it had to be big in terms of an orchestra with a lot of instruments and strings. And then we did the usual spotting, scene by scene.
Now, once when we spoke, you told me in one version of the script, the destruction of Krypton was going to be shown.
Yes, originally in the script, the story started with Krypton being destroyed, and then she escapes. And what happened is, maybe because I arrived and I had a fresher point of view, I just, suddenly when we started analyzing, it became obvious to all of us that it was very, very similar to the beginning in Superman. And then we wanted to stay away from that beginning, so we came up with something else.
Okay, now our first special effect, which is miniature.
Yes, miniature and Derek Meddick's. And then Richard McDonald designed this absolutely breathtakingly beautiful set, which looked a little bit like a crystal structure. It was very delicate and very original.
And this is a matte mixed with the set?
This is a matte and model. This was a model, and now when we go into it, it becomes the real set right here. And it had a lot of floors and different levels, so you could use a lot of depth. As you can see, there are many, many levels on it. The idea was to suggest a world which is very serene, very pure, where there are no conflicts or greed or jealousy or envy.
That's why there's no walls.
Yes, everything is open and serene. Harmony, that was the key word to describe the set.
Oh, it is beautiful. What's that gonna be, Zoltar?
Now, here we come to Helen. And we should talk a little. Peter O'Toole, of course, is wonderful. He was our immediate choice. It was unanimous, and he loved the project. And then Helen, it was an extensive cast search, both in Europe and in the United States. And we read and tested an enormous amount of girls. And we ended up in New York, and she was going to the High School of Performing Arts. And we asked each girl to come in and improvise a costume and what they thought Supergirl should be like. And she had it immediately. I mean, there was never even a close second. And I'll tell you who we read for the part of her friend, Demi Moore.
As Lucy Lane?
Yes. She was going to Brazil to do a picture. She was tempted, but at the last minute, she had something better, a picture with Michael Caine.
Most great artists find mathematics troublesome, Cora. Only use your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn and Earth are in outer space, but we are in inner space.
Now, the overall look of Argo City, how did you come upon that?
It was just, when we talked with Richard McDonald, it was the idea to make it no primary colors, a very pastel, harmonious. It had to be beautiful and very civilized, non-violent. And then the rest fell into place with the off-white walls and translucent and gentle colors.
For inspiration.
Now, this is for real, by the way. It is turning for real.
There's a mechanism under his hand?
Yeah, this is just good old-fashioned special effects. There was a little thing that goes around his finger. Then there was this was optical enhancement, of course.
I think that I shall never see the branches of
This is probably all this would be done with CGI today.
Okay, what about what's in back of her now?
These were things that there were some real things on the set that were done by Alan Hume with lights, and there were also optical enhancements. We discussed a lot because of what is going to follow, when the butterfly gets out.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time with the texture of their world.
Put your fingers here, Cara, and press hard.
Now, there was something which was promoted with her wearing a crown of some sort, or like the bracelet, but around her head, a band.
Yes, she does at one point, I think later.
It's not in the feature. Was that something that was planned and then abandoned, or was it instead of the bracelet, he makes a crown around her head?
I don't remember, to tell you frankly.
Here you have each other and you have Cara.
But Zoltar, you founded this city. It's yours.
As far as the eye can see, right to the veil, smack. And then what? What is beyond? Allure, I cannot contain myself to Argo City, only my head is boiling.
This was kind of tricky, to go from one to the other. This is good old-fashioned, normal, optical enhancement.
Airy, glittery stuff.
Here you can see all the levels of the set.
So that is the set. That's not a
That
map.
is a real set. It was glorious at Pinewood, and it took an enormous amount of space. And then it had also to be structured in a certain way because of when they escape.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was done live. When she gets into that capsule, see what it is? There's something around one of her fingers. And then there was a mechanism with the light.
And the wand she's holding is motorized.
Yes. And then there was optical enhancement. Some frame by frame.
Now, the insect, that's mechanical?
Mechanical. And then it was a combination of mechanical and then a model. This was one of them, normal size. Then we had smaller ones. This was done with wires and animation. We spent a lot of time on that. But because of it had to be thin enough so that, the butterfly could get out. And then it had to be strong enough when it's respire to withhold the outside.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up with a sort of silk, plasticky kind of silk.
You took the Omegahedron.
That's not correct. I lost the Omegahedron.
Oh, no, Father, I did.
Was there any original intentions to draw parallels between the people of Argo City and Krypton and the way they dressed or their architecture or anything? Or did you want to stay away from that?
We sort of stayed away from it. I mean, this is a really different look altogether.
It's very much like the 60s.
Yes. Everything is round. There are no angles. There are no monolithical blocks. It was harmony, very harmonious, and it was very beautiful. It also had to withstand the weight of the capsule moving.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked is the different levels, that there were so many depths to it. Now, we had a sort of a monorail here with wires. It moved the length of the stage, basically.
And that is her, Helen, in there.
Yes, that is absolutely her. This is back to model. Now, when she travels, in this conceptual, you had a lot of discussions about the separation between Supergirl's world and the real world. And we tried and try things for the background, which is behind the sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't come up with anything. And finally, through Terry, who was the English art director, he found someone at Oxford University who was doing some sort of documentaries based on research of the viscosity of liquids. And he had done some images, some documentaries that had very strange images. And you see everything that is the back there,
Mm-hmm.
were some of the elements he had, which we blew up and took portions of and enhanced. These kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
This came from Oxford University, this kind of footage.
Which almost makes them seem like they've been miniaturized, the
Yes,
society.
yeah, I know. It's a little bit like, I love that picture. What was it with Raquel Welch wearing there?
Fantastic Voyage.
Yes, Fantastic Voyage. But what I like, this, in a way, this time, even though it's very abstract,
Yes.
it sort of fits because we end up in water.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a nice transition. There was always, how do you go into this water without explaining? You know, we played with a lot of incredible ideas. At one point, she came out of an inner world, which ended up being a drop on a leaf on a tree.
Which would go back to them being miniaturized
yes,
then.
We played, but finally we settled for what we had because, all the other solutions, here's Peter Cook. So I've ended up working with both separately with both Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. We're a very famous comedic team, a legend in England.
Mm-hmm. Was he first choice for this part?
Yes. And also he was a very, very good friend of Brenda Vaccaro. And he sort of was first choice. I don't remember if we came when or she mentioned it, but we had him he liked the project from the word go.
And Faye Dunaway?
Faye Dunaway we sent her a script, we quoted her, and then I had a couple of meetings with her. And it went very well.
And before you were on, there were other people considered for the part?
No, I don't think so. I think Faye Dunaway was pretty much the top of the list. We wanted someone who would be a worthy adversary for Helen. She had to be sexy, beautiful, and also a consummate actress.
I wonder. Immortality be upon this one.
And how did you first come onto this project? Was it offered to you?
I just finished Enigma, and I was back in LA, and suddenly out of the blue, I got a call by Timothy Burrell who said, how would you like to come to London and meet with the Salkinds? I think Ilya is the one who brought my name up and said, let's meet him. And I'd never done anything like this, and I thought it'd be a challenge and fun.
So you approached it more as a fantasy than science fiction?
Yes. From the beginning, and it was in a way what they were looking for. I said fantasy, and I said if it's Supergirl, then, of course she has superpowers, but there has to be another quality to her. And, of course, we created a new flying system, because I kept saying the flying has to be much more graceful. It should be more like an aerial ballet.
Which in this version now audiences will see domestically what was left out.
Here's again, this is still from the Oxford University footage. Now I tell you, that was one of the most difficult shots ever, was her coming out of the water.
Right there.
That, right there, was a nightmare. Now the second shot you saw is her alive, being pulled by a crane. But the problem was the water. If we started with her underwater, which created a lot of problems, her hair would be wet. You know how we ended up doing it? It was Alan Hume, I think, who came up with the final solution. We made a very good photograph of her and put it on a wood cutout and pulled the cutout out of the water very rapidly.
That simple.
And we had tried very sophisticated things before, and none of them worked.
Did you go through different experimentation with the cape?
Yes. Oh, we did endless tests with the costume, with the cape, with, what length or what shortness.
Mm-hmm.
With her look as Supergirl and her look as Helen.
Was it ever explained in the script how she came upon that outfit? Because it's in there. There is something in there in the bubble.
The only thing we know is that it's an enormous source of energy, which is the source of energy of the city, part of the source of energy.
Well, I meant her costume.
No, we didn't.
You never delved into
that. That was a real... What we're really saying is part of changing from one world to the other is the combination of changing worlds and having the Omegahedron. Now this we were very proud of because it's all very, very tricky stuff. It's done with cranes and wires, but Helen was incredible. She was training 3 hours every day for 3 months to be able to do this. And Bob Harmon, who was in charge of all the wire.
Okay, now we're with blue
Now
screen?
you're with front process and
Okay.
plates.
And was this done like...
Some of these were done in Scotland, if I remember correctly.
Really?
Yeah. And then it was a question of wind machines, the speed of the plate matching the speed of her, the speed of the wind. David Lane, who had done a lot of the Superman, had a whole unit. I mean, they were very experienced. But, I mean, Helen was very good. Also, there's an enormous amount of communication because she has to do arm movements in terms of flying that makes sense, in terms of what's happening with the plate behind her. So while this is being shot, instead of music, you have a lot of orders and sounds of fans. But they had done a lot of this already with the Superman films. I think where it was new was in terms of the approach to the kind of flying, and also I wanted the more depth of field. The flying before had been done with zoom lenses. And then we went more to prime lenses, which makes it much deeper. You'll see especially the night footage.
That's very good. The flare.
Yes. Oh, we used, when we saw the flare on the plate, then we duplicated it. She did an amazing job. The landings and the taking offs are not...
No effort at all.
Are very tricky. This was in Scotland.
Okay, so Selena's Funhouse here.
Yes, it was which is sort of an abandoned carnival house.
The chemistry between her and Brenda Vaccaro is very good.
It was astounding, and
Yeah.
they became very close friends. It was instant. Brenda is very earthy and very funny.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wild kind of set.
Show your face. I have a surprise for you.
All this was shot at Pinewood.
Was it a long shoot?
Yes, it was about 6 months. There was about, I think, 5 months of principal photography, but with the various units, it was much longer. You had also, the flying unit, special effects unit, a real second unit. It's a big operation, a picture, with so many effects and different elements. And this was before CGI, computer-generated image. So very often, you would never see a completed sequence till 3 months later, because you wouldn't have all the elements.
Apartment is history, the car payments are history, the mortgage payments are history.
How are the property taxes?
History. The world is at last my oyster.
I really think the flying in this is really fantastic. She's wonderful.
So there were variations on what she wore then. You experimented not only just on the cape, but on the cut and everything?
Everything. We spent quite a lot of time on the length of the cape, and we had various. We had a cape for flying, and we had a different cape for standing and walking. The cape when she flies is not as long. Everything was decided by the line of the look.
Mm-hmm. Did DC have any input on this? Or any say on what your changes were?
I think they were involved in terms of us not doing anything that would meet with a violent disapproval.
So the scene coming up now had to meet under their approval?
Yes, but they did not say you cannot do this, or I don't remember any incident where they said, well, this is ridiculous. It's not at all. They had consultation rights, and of course we wanted them to be happy with the result. But I mean, they were not involved in all the discussions of storyboards and, how do we do this and what do we do here?
But how about addressing certain situations like this?
Yes. Well, here there were some general rules from the beginning.
What she could not do, what she could
not... Yeah,
what
she could do, what she could not do. It's fantasy, but it cannot stretch credibility to such an extent that, you stop believing it. She's strong, but she's also smart.
She's smarter in our dimension than her own, it seems.
Yes.
Hello.
There's Matt Frower.
Yes.
Hello to you, honey bun.
Hello. I was wondering if you could tell me where I am.
What do they call this place, Eddie? Lover's Lane, isn't it?
You got it in one, Billy boy. Lover's Lane.
Now, where was this filmed? Also,
Also Pinewood.
Well, those lights over there. What are they called?
Check out the view from back here, Eduardo.
Stop that.
You're, Superman's best friend, huh?
No. His cousin. I've come here to search for the...
In the original script, when she arrives on Earth, she was welcomed by her cousin.
Superman.
Yes, and there was this glorious sequence where the two of them fly together. But just before the film started, Chris bowed out. I don't think there was a big fight or whatever. He just thought, I think maybe it was not the right thing to do. So then we had to change things. That's when the aerial ballet came out.
Ah, okay. Were there any other changes in the narrative that had to accommodate
A
that?
little bit later, remind me when the monster arrives.
The bulldozer monster or the storm monster?
The monster outside the door.
Okay.
We are.
You shouldn't have done that, baby. Come on.
Now, for a first role for her, this was very physical, too.
Yes, it was her first picture. She really was a high school kid. She had done a little bit of theater. She was marvelous in terms of talent and professionalism.
So she was a natural before the camera right
Yes,
away.
and she worked so hard. I mean, it was really a lot of hours. She was on training like a Olympic athlete every day, even when she was not shooting. She was swimming or running or practicing the trapeze or doing something else.
Okay, now this scene is longer than what most people have seen also. This party segment. The power of shadow that comes into play now. The evil entity. How did you come upon that look for the creature that we eventually see at the end?
It was basic mythology. I did a lot of research on fantastic literature, what had been done. I think David had already come up with some of it, the writer. And then it was discussions with Derek Meddings. It had to be something, it could not be something that was high-tech or pure science fiction. And there had to be a primeval kind of quality, a basic evil quality. And it had to be instantly obvious. You know, the minute you looked at it, you had to see what it was.
Her id, in a sense.
Yes. And that's when we came up with this sort of, we never knew how to call it. I mean, it's not like the devil in Fantasia, you know, on the mountain. But it has a dragon kind of
It's the
devil
queen.
quality.
It's the queen alien before the queen alien arrived.
Than a human cigarette lighter, dear lady. To wit.
What is that?
Okay, this is what's new to this version that most people have not seen.
I always like that part.
And this little bit coming up here.
Hello. The red toad that lurks in the briars and brambles is full of sorceries. There's a little bone on the left
He
side.
was wonderful.
A little bone which, if bound
He's
to a
passed
man,
away
stirs
since then.
up the greatest lust.
I want to be rich and famous.
Then stick with me.
I was put on this earth to thrill millions. This is scrumptious.
Why don't we go somewhere else and dance cheek to cheek?
Okay, now is this the same actress or was it a stunt double?
This was a stunt double.
Stop it, Selena! That's not fair! Pick on me!
Thanks.
Hey, no sweat.
What happened?
Oh, nothing much. Get out of my
She's great.
house, Nigel. And don't come slithering back.
She fell into her character very well.
Faye?
Faye, yes. She enjoyed this. It was totally different from anything she'd ever done.
Well, it was very much what she would do in Mommy Dearest, in a sense, without the supernatural
This
overtones.
was, let me tell you, this took a while.
The bunny?
Just to get to wait till the bunny would naturally come close to her.
Have you got it, Lucy? You must be near that oak tree.
And we're still in Pinewood here. The whole thing was basically
Yes.
down Pinewood. Okay.
Pinewood is big, you know. We used the big James Bond stage. This was outside of Pinewood, but next to it, very close. And I had seen Lucy in Fame.
Yes. As Doris, I
Yeah,
believe, right?
and she was wonderful.
Was there ever any talk in getting Margot Kidder in this?
No.
Even in a cameo way? No?
No, not really. There was never any talk to try, even the Salkinds from the beginning, they made it very clear that they didn't want, you know, they wanted obviously to be a connection between the two because it's part of the same family, but they wanted this to stand on its own.
Yes. That was a nice transitions. And before we saw Hart Bachner,
Yes. They got along great too, by the way, Helen and Hart. They were very good friends. And I loved Hart. He was wonderful. He's directed since.
writer and his father is Lord Bachner.
Lord Bachner, right.
Where have you been? With the principal. Danvers is doing his usual number. Geez, another barfing new student. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel these days.
Hang in there, Danvers. Don't let him get to you. Ooh, it's early days. This message just started. You'll be...
Hello.
We found, whenever we needed an American accent, there was quite a pool of American actors working or living in London, and that's how we did our casting.
Girls always do. Where are you going? Come back here. Come in.
How many rewrites were you part of when you came onto the
Oh,
project?
they were a lot. Because what happened also is that at the beginning it was Warner's. Then it became TriStar. So David Finney did about 2 or 3 rewrites. And then at the very late in the game before we started, principal photography, then there were studio rewrites.
And what were the most dramatic rewrites that took
Well,
place?
the most dramatic rewrite that took place was there were 2 major sequences which involved Superman. One of them was when she arrived on Earth, he welcomes her, and they fly together. And then later, he loses his powers. He and she, in order to get, she has to go to. He is become an old man. He's lost his immortality and he's lost his powers. And she goes and saves him. And through saving him, gets the key to destroying the evil witch. Well, once Chris, right before the shooting, it was a mutual agreement. It was clear it was not going to do the film. Then we had to replace that with something else, and also it had an impact on everything.
Mm-hmm. But it was still about the Omegahedron.
Oh, it was still basically about the Omegahedron and the witch, but the articulation was different. It changed the tone. Suddenly she was doing much more on her own, and things that did not come from her now came from her and had to be explained why they came from her. It made things more complicated. I personally think it would have been a much richer film, you know, if Superman would have made an appearance.
But different in tone.
Probably. Not entirely, but probably. I was pretty much committed from the beginning to the aerial ballet. Whenever she did something, from the beginning we all agreed that it had to have her quality. So that there had to be a certain elegance, and it couldn't all be strength.
Open up, Lane. I know you're in there.
Now, what's coming up with the poster of Superman? Was that added in to make up for his physical
Yes,
presence?
that was, I think originally that was part, and the Superman thing, that was added up because we all thought it would be a nice moment. It sort of established a connection since we didn't have the real Superman, to show that she was not alone and that there was this feeling between the two of them.
I'm Linda Lee.
So earlier on, the mention of Superman being in a galaxy so many trillions of miles away was a way of just explaining his lack of presence in the film, on the radio. That had to be written in.
Yes.
Okay.
Because then the question was, where is he? How come it's the same planet?
Just now. But we've known each other for years, haven't we, Linda? Oh, gee, I don't think I...
Oh, of course, the Daily Planet, of course. Linda's cousin works there. And your sister, what's her name? The one that's always calling me and bothering me.
Lois.
Ah, yes, that's the one. Anyway, show our new Miss Lee around, Miss Lane. Oh, by the way, she's an orphan. But don't let her play on your sympathies.
Now, Helen's look here, the brown hair and
That
everything.
was a wig. We played with it a lot. You know, we put her in the uniform. We wanted a look that was really different. We didn't want her a nerd, but we wanted to look unassuming and shy. And so that she never looked what she really was.
Right. Unlike just a pair of glasses.
we thought that would be too much. But even in the story, she's very young. And Faye is very worldly. So it's really the young maiden versus the experienced witch.
Well, the Snow White and Evil Queen thing.
Yes, exactly.
And instead of her heart, she wants the heart of the city.
Yes.
Although it still has a Wizard of Oz texture to it, too.
It has a lot of Wizard of Oz. And I must tell you that when I first got involved with the project, I liked that a lot. And I was surprised at how many people didn't pick on that. How very few saw the parallel with Wizard of Oz.
Do you know him?
Superman? Sure. My sister's got something going with the big guy. Hey, listen, you can borrow any of my clothes anytime you want. Just dig in and help yourself.
Thank you. You're very kind.
He's a real character. A real hunk. I'll introduce you to him someday if we wind up getting along.
Now then, focus your tiny minds on the kind of problem that used to take weeks of thought before the computer.
That was nice, that touch. He was perfect because he had that quality, you know. He was the living personification of what W.C. Fields said. Nothing wrong with someone who hates children and dogs.
Now, with Hart entering the picture again, was he the first consideration for the
No,
part?
I met a lot of young actors, and I read a lot of them. We went to New York and had a lot of casting sessions for Helen, but for also other parts, and he was the best. And also, he was the one who looked the best with her, and there was something between them immediately. They really liked each other, and they were good friends, and it showed.
Most people probably remember him now from Die Hard.
Yes, when he had a beard then, when he gets shot. Yes.
Right.
He was very good in that.
Come here, you beautiful thing. He's cute. Hey, what's going on?
Here's an exercise in big numbers I want you to try. The present...
It's trying to tell
Now, the
me
Omegahedron itself, did you consider different shapes, sizes, forms? And
No, but it grows, you know, that box gets, that was part of the concept.
Right.
We ended up with spherical because it's the most universal shape. You know, it's interesting that tests have been done with many cultures, and they're most pleasing, even the most primitive. The most pleasing form is always a circle.
Because it's perfect.
Because it's perfect, because it's the earth, because it's a fruit. I don't know, there's so much symbolism involved. So we wanted it a sphere, and then Richard came up with this sort of design, and then we all agreed on what it should do and how its power with the light and the pulsation should manifest itself. And then we took it from there.
Well, it worked for Michael Crichton with Sphere, right?
Yes.
And something I think a lot of people don't catch on is that container that she has the Omegahedron in is lead.
Yes. Maybe we didn't explain it.
Which is what it's imprisoned it.
It's lead, and also the box keeps growing with it.
You were, in fact, hard at work solving this little equation.
Oh, yes, sir, I was. I mean, I was...
Excellent. The answer, please. Pay attention, class. Miss Lee is about to enlighten us.
5,271,009,010.
Now, look at those computers.
Well, that's when you can tell the picture's dated, right?
It's like looking at war games.
Isn't that funny? That is true that we have made such incredible progress in that area.
In a short time, really.
Very short time, I know.
Correct answer. How?
I guess I just...
And that was state of the art at that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'm sure there's still schools with those same computers now.
We gotta go, sir.
Oh, boy, thanks. You know, I gotta learn...
How'd you know the answer?
I don't know, 6-dimensional geometry. I never could do it before.
Yeah. Well, you want some friendly advice? Don't go showing it off, because nobody's going to like you. I'll see you later.
Okay, did the bully here have a longer part, or was she ever, did it ever delve into her character more than it does
No,
here?
it didn't. There was just this, and then, the later scene when they are in
The shower?
in the shower. That is something where we probably should have developed her more.
Earlier, there was an effect when she was in the office. She was speeded up,
Yes,
and there was a blur effect.
yes.
That was an optical blur that was added
Yes, that
later
was
in the-
all optical enhancement. I shot it at normally and at various speeds, and then it was all, skipping frames and optically making it a ghost image.
Working on the tree. She could be around for a while.
Are they in? Yes.
Really, a lot of her powers, a lot of ground is covered very quickly in terms of setting up what she's capable of.
That was one of the problems, by the way.
What? Which?
Well, it's how to orchestrate it so it doesn't look as if you're just to make it palatable, so it's not like she's got A, she's got B, she's got C, she's got D. So we try to integrate it within the story.
Right.
And once that is done, then we went on with the...
Were there powers considered that weren't shown?
Basically, she has the same powers that Superman has. X-ray vision and, enormous physical force and bullets bounce off her. Immortality. We'd never delved into that. We never explained, but she is not totally infallible because she can be imprisoned in that...
Phantom Zone.
Yes.
Well, it seems that anything with their own technology, they're still vulnerable.
Which is the basic concept of Superman. They're still vulnerable
Right.
to what comes from home.
Because I have holes in my ears?
What are you putting me on? Sometimes I can't figure you out.
But Selina's able to do things to her because she's using Supergirl's technology or her people's technology.
And also her own powers. She has some powers.
Right.
And the Omegahedron, in a way, is like an amplificator.
Right. But
It amplifies.
But it's a skew because science and mysticism just don't mix. It seems to go out of control sometimes, or it doesn't do
Yes.
what she wants, like she says later on.
We're back to the golem.
Yes, yes. Well, that's basically what this is in a sense.
Yes.
Also,
This was funny.
I think he's real stuck on me. Anyways, I could ask him to bring a friend along. What are you doing?
there really are hippies on Krypton, huh? I mean, in Argo
Well,
City.
it opened up a whole... What it implied, of course, is that they never wear anything.
Yeah.
Just a sec. Hey, Linda. I'll see you later at Popeye's then, okay?
All right, I'll try.
Now, this is when we're coming close to the monster, right?
Soon enough, yeah.
Time.
Why was the Chicago region chosen around there? Why that city?
I think that's where the school is. Middle West, there was always a Middle West. Wasn't Superman as a child also in the Middle West?
In well, yeah, Smallville, yeah, farm community.
Also, there's a great skyline of Chicago, when you come from the water.
Wonder if that drive-in still exists anymore.
I doubt it.
Well, one thing's for sure, you couldn't apply THX sound conditions to drive-ins,
No.
could you?
This blew the whole crew's mind when she did that.
That's a real spider?
Yes.
Wouldn't get me to do it.
Inside, 2 shells.
And by the way, we did not kill the spider, but I mean, the way she just... Even Brenda said, my God, I'd never do that.
No.
Which has been added, some of the web. With a silver spoon, put 2 drops
I like that little sound effect with the spider, too.
Yeah.
into some water. Right. He
This
who
is
drinks
going
the
back
water
to Snow
shall
White
be in love
and the
with
Evil
the first
Queen.
Oh,
person
yeah.
he
And the Evil Queen wants to get Prince Charming, in a sense.
So long
Yes.
as the spider is shut up in the nutshell, or one day goes by, whichever comes first.
Big deal one day. Why don't you just use,
I'm saving it for bigger things.
That was a Mae West delivery.
Yes. Now, when we come, one thing, well, maybe I'm premature here, but that whole major sequence where he drinks the love potion later?
Mm-hmm. And he's chased by the bulldozer?
Well, I needed all that was built outside, and I needed 22 days of good weather, 22 consecutive shooting days of good weather. And of course, the crew died laughing. They said, General, there hasn't been 22 consecutive good days in England since the origin of man. And I tell you, there must have been a guardian angel, because we got exactly 22 days of good weather. It was cloudy the first day, and it started raining the end of the last day, because all that had to be shot outside.
It was a complex scene, too.
Very.
It was because the whole thing is like a domino effect.
Yeah, that was the most complicated sequence in the film.
Yes, I'm sure they do.
Wet your whistle.
Huh? Oh, yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't mind if I do.
He comes across as a solid New Yorker.
I think he was raised in L.A. He was good. He was in good shape. He had interesting looks without being, too cutesy.
Well, at the time he was being pushed as that type, leading man type thing or love interest.
Well, also, she's very blonde, so I didn't want to... I wanted to stay away from a blonde.
So, where's the wand? At?
It dropped dead.
Where at exactly? Out back?
I thought we might get to know each other a little more before we dig in and talk real turkey.
Well, see, I'm kind of a private person, I mean, I do my work, I go home.
Do you what?
And how much was this filmed out of sync? In terms of scenes, I mean...
Oh, completely.
Because of the effects?
Because of the effects. The whole picture was... Also because of weather. We started this in the spring, so I think locations had to... I remember a lot of the aerial ballet was done early on, before the bad weather set on. And the stuff in Scotland was done fairly early, too, because we had about 5 days of shooting in Scotland, which had to be done before we got nasty weather. And also, it took quite a while to build that open-air complex.
The small town, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, that was a gigantic set.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a set at all.
Yeah, that was enormous.
Was it modeled after a real town?
It was sort of a compilation, and then I sat with Richard after we had the storyboard, and we went over all the incidents that were supposed to happen. The tire, the water tower, and then he designed it around the demands of the script.
You probably killed him,
Sleep well. And when you wake, drown in my eyes and be all mine. If that's the goddamn Jehovah's Witnesses again, I'll get it.
Oh, hello.
This also contains a scene which domestic audiences never saw, where she puts a little curse on him here.
Yes.
I want to see Selena.
She's indisposed at the moment.
Whoever it is, we don't want any.
It's Nigel, and he's not going away until he talks to you.
He was so perfect for this.
What the devil do you want?
I want to make a very serious proposal.
In that outfit.
This is a leisure suit. I've got 3 days off when those...
Who came up with him wearing that?
We wanted something really, that would work for the line, and really, and Peter was the kind of guy who would do anything, He's a very, very funny man. You never heard
Oh, sure.
his stuff with Dudley Moore? I mean,
Bedazzled.
yeah, they're incredible. So when we get outside, that was that enormous thing, and it got very complex because we were not only flying people, but we were also flying people and objects together.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly you were dealing with scenes where you had to really literally take into consideration the position of each wire so they wouldn't get into the way.
So it was choreographed.
It was choreographed. It was really worked out between all the units in advance. A lot of rehearsing. And it was very tricky to shoot. Because it was all done live. Plus timing, you know. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but...
Well, there's a lot to say about that scene, so that's good.
It was nice talking to you, Nigel.
I hate to seem pushy, my fairest of the fair, but
A word of advice, Nigel. If I had your skin problems, I'd stop bothering people, put a bag over my head, and go live under a bridge.
Ouch! There's nothing wrong with my skin. Bitch!
You know some people. Where is he? Where is he?
Okay, this is added too. This wasn't in the domestic version.
It wasn't?
No.
You know, I think this is the last version I saw then.
What? For a day tops, right? He was too young for you anyway, you know?
No, I do not know.
There we have the magic mirror.
Yes, well, now we're really into Snow White. We were aware of that, by the way.
But that's an easy way to connect with the kids, too, you
Yes.
know? That you want that.
Oh, the cable's out. What?
The kid.
This is a mirror.
She was so funny. The two of them were really great.
Was any of that ad-libbed, or?
Some ad libs,
Yeah.
some gestures, and they always came up with shticks. Brenda is very inventive. The two of them were really, it looked as if they've been doing it for years together.
You should let that thing out of its box, you know? Maybe it's more powerful if you let it out of its box.
The box.
The box.
Where is it?
The box? It's underneath the rug where you left it. Go ahead.
Here we see it's grown.
Yes.
It's stuck.
This is not my day.
Stuck? How could it be stuck?
Did she always have a female sidekick, even in the script?
How could it be growing?
Selena.
It's made
Yes.
of lead.
Yes?
Yes.
And that's just an optical added later.
Yes, that's just an optical added later, and the little light in the box was just a wire up a sleeve.
Okay,
This
here
is
we
where
are.
it gets really... All this was orchestrated weeks and weeks ahead. Where he would go, where he would come, what he would do.
Okay, now here, where she runs through. Was there a cut there that was done so smoothly
no.
we couldn't see?
No, what was done... Yes. I stopped the camera, and then I continued. Then it was blended optically, the move. It's quite
Okay, the
extraordinary.
pan, you mean,
Yes.
was blended. Okay.
And we froze everything.
Mm-hmm.
But when it gets into the bulldozer, you know, that's straightforward special effects, the bulldozer trajectory and everything it does. But when she comes and lifts it, that was really the most complex.
Now, the bulldozer, without a driver, it was remote controlled.
Well, there was someone hidden with different
really?
controls. What they do usually is they put either the controls behind,
Mm-hmm.
so you can have someone, or someone is inside and the controls are manual. I think it'd be quite difficult to remote control something that size
And dangerous.
and that weight.
And the guy with the bow tie? That's Jimmy. So you want to come? Oh, I don't know. I'm not signed out for an overnight. Well, so what? Go back, sign in, and climb out the window. Mrs. Murphy's drunk as a skunk by now. Totally on another planet.
Now, how many extras were
Oh,
in this scene?
God, they were hundreds. Hundreds and hundreds. We had a whole town going. And I was petrified about the weather all the time.
Yet the sky is beautiful. It
Yes,
seems,
we had,
yeah.
I tell you, someone was looking. We had a guardian angel. And it doesn't look like her set at all.
No, it doesn't. And here's Mark McClure, right?
Yes, he was excellent, too. He's, in a way, the common element.
He's the only one, really?
Yes.
So he was approached from the beginning?
From the beginning. He knew the Salkinds. He'd been part of all the Supermen. He was very talented and a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, you go out there and try to help a guy like that, and he's probably got a gun or a knife, you know. It's not too safe. Hey, I'm starving. Let's eat.
Come on, Linda.
Power of shadow. Bring him to me.
And you see this, the mythology looks like a mouth.
It's one of the best pieces by Jerry also,
Yes.
this piece of music.
This was tricky too.
Look at that.
Okay, from here on now is what took 21 days now, right?
Oh my God, yes. We've already done 2-3 days here, easy. You know, this is very time consuming and you have to do it bit by bit. For instance, if this doesn't work, the second take, you got to put another car, start from scratch. And we did it in bits.
And that's hard in there all the time.
Oh,
too.
yes. Here, it's hard. I really was very careful. It was never fast. He's very athletic, but we never... It's only when it was really, really dangerous that I put... Like when he's grabbed at one point, there's a stunt man. Here it was all him. That was not him. You see when the thing went in. Now, of course, you know, all this was pre-rigged. What would break...
Okay, that wasn't him then.
No. There it wasn't him, but the one before it was him. Here it is him.
You've never seen a tattoo before, Linda?
Look!
That.
There's somebody hanging out. There's a leg. Look like the same
leg.
leg.
Oh my God! It's a runaway! Somebody's gotta do something!
Hey, what you doing? Lucy, be careful! Lucy! Lucy!
In this part here, the strings fight against the horns, and then the flutes come in sounding Egyptian.
Yes, you know, the first time I heard this, we recorded in what was, I think, a church. And it was extraordinary the first time I heard the score. I'd heard it only, you know, on synthesizers at Jerry's house.
The samplings, yeah.
Samplings. This is where it started.
Yeah. It's just one thing leads to another.
Yeah, one thing leads to another. It was the domino effect, and everything had to be prepared separately in terms of steps. What led to what? All this is basically live, mechanical special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was, of course, separate because, you know, very often the tire would not continue rolling. But all this is straight mechanical, very well done effects. This was ghost image, optical enhancement.
Okay, when Helen takes off here, that's her on wires?
Yes. Let me double check. That's her. She was on wires and it was a jumped landing, but she was already on wires.
Okay.
So that's what gave you that effect. And what they did is pull back a little bit as she landed. Now, she takes off on wires and then it's a model. That's wires. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's her, but when she goes through the thing, that's a model.
The water tower is a model
Yes.
too. And that was a miniature of
That
her?
was a miniature of her.
So was it forced perspective then?
Yes, that's also it's not exactly a model, but what we used to call the Supergirl silhouette.
And what was that made out of?
I think it was made out of a combination of metal and wood, plastic. That's her on wires.
Okay, this is what you were talking
This is
about.
really the difficult because we had to land her on it. And the bulldozer itself, what she lifted, was on separate wires. And all this was moving forward.
And it had to be synchronized, so it lifted with her.
It's all on wires here. She's on wires, and the other thing is on wires too. Now that was that she stopped it. And now she disconnects it, and that. See, she was on wires to fly, and the thing wasn't. You had a whole bunch of wires there.
Plus
on different cranes, and everything had to be synchronized.
Sure, because otherwise she could have hurt herself.
Yes.
She would have gone into it.
Well, we're very cautious.
And even here, right?
Yes. Same thing, landing with all the separate wires. And then this is a different cut. And it was the same idea. She went around, we froze the camera, and then continued the shot. And this was sweet.
Don't look at her. You're gonna be all right. There's no broken bones.
I love you.
It's funny, that shot reminds me of what later would appear in Little Mermaid.
Oh, really?
When he's on the beach and wakes up and sees her looking
Yes.
at him, yeah. So maybe we should have Helen sing part of his world now.
And you know what's interesting is that the love potion goes back to the Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
A bird of free and careless wing was I through many a smiling spring. The cold repulse, the look askance, the lightning of love's angry glance. Stay. Let me behold you.
I have to go.
I guess DC said no tongue, huh?
Well, it was not like that, but we wanted to keep it very... It was interesting when you know them, by the way, but, you know, he stayed with me for a while, because I had a big house, and he was like my adopted son.
Hart?
Yeah. He lost his place, and he had a new place, and he had like 2 days where he didn't have a place where to go, and I had some extra bedrooms. And he then already said he wanted to direct. He was very keen on that. He was very serious. He used to ask a lot of questions about the technical execution of the film.
He went on to be in War and Remembrance.
Yes. What did he play in? The son?
Yeah, the son.
The eldest son.
Who was married to Jane Seymour's character.
Kid alone and worry about the other one that flies. I worry about everything. It's my job. Stand back. Oh, come on now. She's just a teenager. What good is a sword if it's not unleashed? But she's a total zero. You don't even know her name. The naming of names is not necessary. I'll just concentrate on her face and my shadow.
This is leading up to the next big special effects sequence.
Your what? Power of shadow. Take
Look at
shape.
Brenda's face. She's so great in this.
Look like a vicious dark star. Seek out that wretched young creature and destroy her wherever she are. Oh, God, that's awful. That's never gonna work.
Oh, this is live.
It's very theatrical. Very,
Yes.
yeah. Now, did they expect all this, or did you pull any surprises on them?
Well, no, I didn't pull surprises, but none of us knew exactly. You see, this was pre-rigged and then revealed. But when the furniture went up in the wind, none of us knew exactly where everything was going to go.
So it wasn't as well planned as the other scene.
Well, it's not that. It's that, it changes with every take. We made sure that nothing bad was going to happen to them. But it changed from take to take.
Did anyone get hurt doing anything at any time?
I'm trying to remember, no. I think we're very cautious and very fortunate. I think there were a couple of pulled muscles with the Bob Harmon unit because, they always have to pull on those wires. This originally was going to be the scene where Supergirl goes and finds Superman, an old man having lost his powers, and realizes she has to do it alone. She helps him and therefore gets the key to the destruction. Then we replaced it with this.
The Monster Storm. It's the Monster Invisible.
Storm, yes.
Yeah.
And these were really extraordinary because what they were, a lot of these were pre-rigged things which then happened by gravity or suction.
What's coming up, you mean?
Yeah, you know, the steps and...
The crushing of the cars.
Yes.
Now, all of that was a miniature landscape by Derek?
No, some of that was live.
Really?
Yes, some of it was built as a set. The footsteps were done live, and the car, I think, was done live too.
That was added also for this version. That was cut from the
It was?
domestic, yeah. Yeah, they cut out a lot of the character stuff, which her performance suffered because of those cuts.
I wonder why.
Because they didn't move the story along.
Because I thought that moment was charming.
Well, these are the things that would have made it more marketable, I think, to young girls.
This was all done on a set.
All of outside, this whole outside segment.
This outside set was actually inside. It was built on a stage.
So it's really old-fashioned Hollywood movie making.
Yes, in a way. This is gravity and suction. You see, this was done live.
Did it play that way, or was it the other way?
No. It's like this. What they had is they had a thing inside that was bolted, and it was like a hydraulic thing that instead of expanding, two elements get closer to each other.
There she is again. What'd she say? This is not possible. This is not right. Where's the wimp?
Okay, that's not Helen now.
No.
I think he can take care of her.
That's when she gets the idea. All this was storyboarded. This was tricky too, you know, flying, carrying that thing.
Mm-hmm. That was her or miniature?
That was her, then miniature. Then that was front process.
With her?
With her, the last one. That's miniature. That's her, front process. That's where the thing gets charged. Miniature, her. And you know, sometimes what happened, we'd edit and then try and then it wouldn't work. And then you take another pass and until you got it right. It was a lot of work. But I had a lot of great magicians working. You know, that whole Roy Field, Derek Meddins, David Blank. This was all done afterwards.
That's all still inside, right?
Yes.
Wow. How large was that sky backdrop?
Huge.
Every time! Every time! Send a man to do a woman's job, and that's what you get. Damn her eyes. Who is she? Are you asking me? I'm telling you.
Now, when she said, you know, she complains about a man doing a woman's job, later on when we see it, it's female. Was that planned?
No, it's not.
Yeah, there's a slide of it.
Oh.
It has, it's built.
We never were very... well, I know why we came with that is because since it was the creation of Selena,
right?
They had to be a connection with her. That, I think, was the rationale. We always called it It.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you yes ma'am me.
No, ma'am.
It gave us a lot of trouble, but I tell you what gave us the most trouble. Derek and Roy spent an enormous amount of time. Was the thing that kills Peter O'Toole.
Oh, the storm, the
that whirling
thing. Mm-hmm. What, in concept or coming up with it?
It never came out right. I mean, we took a lot of passes at it.
Can you get that through your thick skull and into your tiny brain, Bianca? The girl can fly.
You see, the advantage of computer-generated images is you can do anything. But when it's not like that, you have to come up with mechanical things
Yes.
that will give you enough of an illusion so you can enhance it optically.
Plus, the other advantage with computers is that you get to see what you want quicker.
Yes.
Instead of waiting so long.
And you can do so much more.
Let's get serious. Come to Mama.
It actually takes the image of that.
Of that
cover. Thing she has it in, the creature.
Yeah, I remember that.
Selena, cut it out! I'm not doing it!
So she really wasn't hesitant in doing any of these things, Helen.
No, not at all. We had this wonderful guy who was a trainer. She was put on a general training program, like Chris had been put, which is to give her muscles, to give her stamina. I mean, like an athlete. And on top of that, she had a special flying training program every day. Long before we started shooting, she started 3 months before.
Really?
Every day. Oh, it was a lot of work. And she did a lot of swimming and running and everything. I mean, she really had to work very, very hard. And we were very honest, by the way. We warned before, whenever we interviewed, that it was going to be a lot of hard work, that there would have to be a lot of personal commitment, and responsibility.
It's the whip again. And she's trespassing.
Now, I suppose lines were drawn in terms of how far this romance could go, as it was with Lois Lane and Clark Kent.
Oh, yeah,
Superman.
there was never any consideration of really, look, it stays very naive. First, he's under the influence of the love potion. But, I mean, we never seriously considered it being consummated, if that's what you're thinking about. It was never in the script.
I know you think me the fool, but at least tell me your name.
Linda. Linda Lee.
Linda. Lovely Linda Lee. These roses pale beside thee.
Now, when you directed these people, like in scenes like this, I mean, it had to be slightly tongue-in-cheek, obviously.
It was tongue-in-cheek because we all laughed a lot, but they did it well.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there was a lot of... This was very funny. We really...
What are you doing?
Please?
Oh, no,
Please?
In a way, it was courageous for him to accept this role, because he's playing the equivalent of what would be the dumb blonde.
He's playing a nerd, basically.
Well, more than a nerd.
But he liked that.
He did.
He also thought it would stretch him as an actor, and he was right. Because he always was cast because of his looks.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't even know you. I don't even know your name.
Ethan. Say my name aloud but once, and I shall die the happy fool.
Look. Ethan.
Her soft caress did at once renew the beating of his broken heart.
Are you crazy?
In terms of the dialogue, were a lot of changes made by either you or the actors from the script?
Not really. I was always nervous about this scene, When I saw it, I liked it. And I thought it worked.
It plays better than it reads, probably.
Yes. It was, again, tone. It's always the same problem. You're dealing with a story like this. If the people inside of it are very, very real, then the overall story becomes more and more difficult to believe. So there always has to be a larger-than-life quality. But in this one especially, we had witches and the Peter O'Cook character.
But it's very stylized.
Yes.
Even in Argo City, when Mia Farrow says, without the Omegahedron, the air we breathe will grow so thin. No one talks like that.
Yes.
So I guess if you...
That was a commitment from the beginning.
To handle it that way.
Well, yes, because I don't know whether we were right or not, but, there is something very also kind of These are not normally, kind of picture here, you expect explosions, There is a kind of a wildness about some of those sequences.
Now, when there was a long shot of her and the ride.
That was done for real, but what we also did is shot of her blue screen.
Okay.
There they stop. Boy, you're really getting the hang of this.
The look is very stylized too. This is fantasy now.
Yes. Also the coloring.
Yes.
Everything is
very
hyper and
very
nice.
The result of long discussions with McDonald. And
now, when you did that,
it's very rich,
Very rich, saturated.
texture,
Yeah. What was it pushed at all in the lab later?
It was done. No, just what we did in the timing, put a lot of red, but also in the sets, in the design itself, with the lights and everything. And we used some filters. That was Alan Hume.
Mm-hmm.
He used some filters here to enhance, the effects of the lights.
And I don't scare easily.
No.
No.
Try this.
Then this was a riot. This was storyboarded a lot. The look was great, but this was complicated stuff.
And that's hard all the time.
That's hard all the time.
Now, that wasn't done in camera with a lens, a special lens.
No,
was
that
it?
was not.
That was optical.
That was optical enhancement. This was playing with speed of camera, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as fast. I speeded it up.
Okay, what about this scene now? With these javelins
This
coming towards
she did. I just did normal, and then it was optically enhanced, and then we did the result live.
You dropped them down around
Yes.
her live.
Well, this is again tricky. Here you got wires on everything.
In front of a screen.
Yeah, and when they did it's live, and then when we put the roof at the bottom of the screen, and then you're into process.
You okay? No. You want a hacksaw or something? Sigaraka, fka, skoo! Now I am really upset.
Did Faye question you how far she could go? Or did you just give her free rein?
Well, we had a lot of discussions before we started about how far do you go with this. And I said, look, go with your nature. Go as far as you feel you want to go. I think it's important for you to have fun. So the audience senses you're having fun with that character.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, and if I feel it's too much, I'll tell you.
So you didn't want her to play it too sinister, really?
No, I wanted it to play larger than life. Like those kind of characters, there is a built-in humor. You look at Gene Hackman as,
Lex Luthor.
There was the same. There is a self-deprecation.
Yes. Or John Lithgow in Santa Claus. Yeah.
So I think it's important that the person who's doing it have fun, because that fun is contagious.
Where am I?
You're safe.
Safe? Where's Linda? Put me down. Where's my Linda?
Take it easy.
You threw that, I guess, huh? How many takes did that
Somebody.
take?
I ended up throwing it too.
Did you really, though?
Yeah. But we all had quite a bit of takes. It's always the things like that take.
Frustration out of the director?
No, but that was in Scotland, by the way. But it's It's always, the little things that when you read, you say, oh, that'll be a piece of cake.
So how many takes did that take to get just right?
I don't remember, but I remember it took a while because it never would come the right angle.
Maybe they're too far away. I can make the sky rain coconuts with pinpoint accuracy, but I still can't control men's minds. Not with her around. So maybe... Now, don't go through the roof. But maybe we ought to back down and give old you-know-who a call. You-know-who? Spit it out. Nigel. I shall pretend you didn't say that. But I did.
Now, the black magic element. Was there discussion over how far to go with that and how explicit it should be?
Well, we didn't want to create a bunch of disciples out there who would start doing things. And also, we were not really accurate in terms of black magic because none of this really gets sexually evil.
Mm-hmm.
So it was still kept within the limits of the genre.
More towards fantasy again.
Yeah, we never left fantasy. From the beginning, it was more fantasy than sci-fi.
But the Argo City stuff has a style to it that's more biblical almost. Maybe because of the way they're dressed and their manner of speech. It's that antiquated way of speaking that you hear like in Ben-Hur and stuff like
yes.
that.
What's in it for me?
Me.
Aha.
My dear Nigel, the way to a woman's heart is through the elimination of her rivals.
Murder? Are you proposing that...
Certainly not. Leave that to me. You deliver the goods. Her.
Her? How?
That was an interesting trio, you have to admit.
Yes.
She'll follow.
Lots of coloring. Lots of colors. Very rich.
But look how he offsets them, too.
Yes.
I mean, she's always dressed in Oriental stuff, too, Faye, it seems.
Well, Faye was wearing outrageous stuff and looked great.
And you want him here, Johnny Appleseed, in your living room?
Yes, in the flesh.
So she'll follow? No other reason?
None.
You're sure of that? Whoops, I'm sorry. The little spider got out.
What? Where am I? Who are you? Kara? What happened?
You got hit on the head by a coconut.
Huh? What's with the Halloween costume?
This is not a costume. These are my clothes.
What do you mean?
Look, I have to go now. I will come back for you later, I promise. I've just got to get back to the amusement park.
Amusement park? Linda! I gotta find Linda. She was in trouble.
The production team, was it pretty much sealed in stone because of their past association with the Salkinds?
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
No, Richard McDonald had never worked with the Salkinds before.
But
and neither had Jerry Goldsmith, but David Lane, Roy Field, Derek Meddings, they all had done Superman 1 and Superman 2. Now, if I remember correctly, this was done between Superman 2 and Superman 3, right?
Yes, I think so.
Which was the one with Richard Pryor?
That was 3. So it was done after that, I think, then.
Yeah, this was done right after 3. They were in post-production with 3 when we did this.
Yes. I shouldn't be telling you this, though. I'm here on...
Wait a minute, wait 1 minute. I mean, you can do the whole number, leap tall buildings at a single bound, can look right through things.
Yes.
Bend steel bars?
Yes.
Whoa.
Oh, Selena, I have to go. Selena has the Omegahedron.
Please, take me with you. I have to find Linda.
What is it?
The Burundi wand. Pure, unadulterated evil.
I know that.
He had a lot of fun with that, Peter Kirk. Well, this was right, with his incredible sense of humor. I mean,
what is that thing exactly? It's bones over here.
Yes.
But what's he holding? I mean, what's the...
It's like bones and teeth, and we like the name.
Who came up with that? David Odell?
I think Odell.
Yeah?
But how can you love her? You don't even know her.
Oh, yeah, I do. If she's in trouble, then I got no business standing here talking with you. Even if you are what you say you are.
Linda is not in trouble.
Look,
any of these majors were, like Hart's character and Peter Cook's character, Brenda Vaccaro, were they toned down a little bit in terms of screen time, or were they...
No,
originally...
that was... in terms of their time in the story, it was pretty much a reflection of the original.
Really?
Except for that major change. There were three changes that were major in a way. It was first the beginning, when suddenly we all realized it was exactly like the beginning of Superman. And we came up with a new beginning. Originally, it was the destruction of the city.
Uh-huh.
And then when suddenly there was no more alliance between Supergirl and Superman, then those three things influence changes. But there was no point where we said, well, we're going to make this person more important than it was originally. Once you start, everything gets so complicated. There's very little time.
Did you have access to scenes from Superman, the destruction of Krypton?
I had access in terms of looking at material and anything they had ever done. And
Really?
I wanted to. Yes, and I spoke a lot to Derek and Roy and David Lane about how they had done some of the other things. Like, when I wanted to do her flying upside down and turning into a loop, they had never done anything like that. But they helped me a lot in terms of what they could do, what they could not do. We started a new flying system on this. And everybody was very nervous at the beginning, but then it worked very well. Because we were a little bit limited because we had no zooms in terms of when people were flying, you could not let them exit frame. But we had much more depth and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is incredible because Derek Meddings did this on glass. The way they used to do it in the silent days.
So it was done in camera. It wasn't processed later.
No, and I'll show you the shot. This is all perspective. It blew my mind because I saw it done. We had to wait. When she flies, he put the glass on which he had painted. It's what the mountain in front of the camera, and then
Right.
she flew towards it.
That. So you flew her live there?
Yes.
And that?
That is a separate shot. That was a model shot.
That's
that
process.
Too. Process plus model. And this was just a set.
Kind of like a warped Emerald City now.
Ethan?
Now, who came up with that mirror design?
Richard McDonald.
Ethan?
This is the shape.
Yeah, well, that's classic occult.
Yeah, of the thing to come. And that was just to plant the seed there.
Ethan!
Okay, she really bumped into a piece of acrylic or something?
Yes. And then this was created afterwards.
Enjoy your prison, Supergirl. Forever and ever.
Now, the Phantom Zone had been set up from two previous films, at least entering it.
Now, the Phantom Zone was really where Richard McDonald, I thought, really did extraordinary feats of imagination. First, we all knew what it should look like. We wanted it to be a desperate place, a very gloomy place. It had to be done on stage, but it also had to give the illusion of being very wide.
Did you consider shooting it in black and white like it's portrayed in the comics?
We did at one point, but then there were a lot of discussions, and then we all felt it was too long. We were there too long. It would have been all right to be in black and white, but, I mean, the amount of time you spend there, it would have become like a movie within a movie. So then the idea was to create the black and white in the design. Now, as you can see, there's very little color.
Yeah, except for her, right?
Except for her. And that gook, by the way, was made with toothpaste with other stuff added to get the right texture and the color.
What's that, a sponge rock type deal?
Yes.
Now, much of this has been cut, usually domestically.
You mean the walking through? This
When-
is the last version I saw.
No, when she landed, she yelled. She squeezed the rock, but it didn't make much sense because they had cut when she crushed the rock originally on Earth. So it just didn't make sense.
I know, but look,
So this is, for the first time, people are going to see this as it should be.
and it's much better.
Sure, well, it makes sense.
You know, there's some 19th century engravings about being kicked out of Martin. I don't know if you know John Martin, where there are skies like that. I remember Richard and I used to talk about that.
Really?
Then there's what we call the gook.
And that was toothpaste.
Well, it was not. It was, I tell you, it looked horrible. And the idea of going into there was really not. And we discussed also what kind of viscosity it should have and how semi-liquid, and it should really be disgusting. But I think there was a lot of toothpaste mixed with something else, and she was a real trooper in terms of going into it and doing it.
You can't arrest me without a warrant.
Slow down.
Please watch Selena out!
Smile, lunkhead. You're not a gardener anymore. You're Prince Ethan now.
Are we gonna stand up to her or not? Yeah! Selena, let's go!
Who's this little twerpette?
She's someone who believes in freedom.
Oh, Lucy, it's not a good time to express yourself.
I don't know who you think you are, or what evil force you represent. But if you think you can just get rid of anybody who stands up to you, just make them disappear. Like my friend Linda.
Who?
Linda, my roommate. She disappeared the day that mountain showed up.
A whim.
Was there any more to this? To what happens in the town?
No.
Takeover? No?
You mean in terms, was there footage that was cut out?
Well, was it considered to show her power more far-reaching?
No, I think this was it. I think we all decided that we would show what was happening, we would show that how the people were in jeopardy, how Selena was corrupting everything she touched, but then get back to what happened to Helen.
Mm-hmm.
Kara.
Did any of the previous drafts of this go into other prisoners there? Because they're mentioned, but they're never shown.
They mentioned that this was a place, at the beginning, we all agreed that it was the place where everybody went. And you don't know exactly what it is, but you know it's someplace terrible. But that was a deliberate choice to make her really totally alone. And then when she loses him, she loses everything. And it made also his sacrifice and his loneliness there more poignant. He was extraordinary. He was great with her. She adored him, by the way. He was very supportive, very helpful, professional. He has this incredible quality.
No. Squirt.
What is that? Where are we?
Nowhere.
Phantom Zone?
It's lonely here, my Carol. So sad. I've been here forever, and I shall stay here forever.
Ethan?
Yes, my darling.
Don't call me your darling. You despise me. Get me the coffer's shadow.
Yes, my darling.
The design of the mirror took a long time because we all knew there was so much stuff to come out of that mirror eventually. That was normal, before and after.
Oh, Jimmy.
Oh, terrific. The old dangling in a cage routine. Pathetic, Selena.
Who's that guy?
He's my math teacher, I think.
What are they for? Insurance.
But you can't just give up. You founded a whole city.
I did, and then I doomed it to destruction. That was an error, a tragic one.
When you're my age and you make as many tragic errors as I do, it is...
That's another thing. There's more of an explanation, of course, in the comic book about how Argo City came to be and what it is and where it is. And Did you wrestle with that in terms of explaining it?
We tried, but the problem was that we ended up with a film that was so long, and also it becomes very expository in film. I'm sure there are things probably we should have explained more or better, but we felt when we started the film that the balance between exposition and the real story was accurate.
What is this?
A horse, I think. On Earth, I think it's called a horse.
And you made this here? Then you haven't given up.
Don't be ridiculous.
Earth, Zoltar, Earth, a tree, a horse. You keep making things from Earth.
The place intrigues me.
Well, then let's go there.
Certainly. When is the next train?
What is a train? What's so funny? Don't laugh at me, Zoltar.
I'm only laughing at myself. For you, I weep.
Is this train a way out of here?
There is no way.
But you know what? I think when I'm looking at it again now, it's really, there's a lot of texture in terms of the sets and the looks of the sets.
Yes, very rich looking.
Yeah, it changes considerably.
But some of it, like the Phantom Zone set, it looks something that you would see in opera.
Yes. Well, in opera or in paintings,
Mm-hmm.
probably if it was done today, there would be a high-tech look to it. It would be a whole different... But I think because we were dealing with fantasy and sorcery, it all has to be more...
Gothic and classical and medieval.
Classical and mythical.
Yeah, which is what makes it so different from Superman also, because
Yes.
Superman is more high-tech
Yes.
in that way. Fortress of Solitude is a cleaner design like that.
And that's why also, because that was a natural way of being different without losing the connection.
Also, her adventure is more of an internal one of
Yes.
growth, where Superman is more of a physical one to overcome the odds.
Also, she remains a teenager all throughout, while Superman is already an adult, really. I mean,
Well, we follow him from...
we follow
yeah.
him, but with skips. You have him as a very small child, and then you have a little bit of him as a teenager, but most of adult. She doesn't change age. We pick her up at a certain age and stay with her during the same age.
She just matures inside.
Yes. This is more an adventure.
A personal adventure.
A personal adventure.
But in a sense, both of them are, because Superman was looking for a place to be.
Yes.
Because he was orphaned. She's not orphaned, but she's... Alone and looking to find strength within herself, like Dorothy.
It is closer to that.
Yes, because she finds the grass is not necessarily greener on the other side of the portal, or the other dimension. And she does pick up a bunch of has-beens, actually.
Tomorrow, Thursday, Friday.
Just like here, we go for the cops first, right?
And the army. By Saturday, we have the continent.
Now, her choice of costume for the final confrontation is interesting, because you're dressing a witch in white.
It was really to make her the most beautiful and the most powerful she'd ever been, basically. That's what it came from, to give her a completely different look that we'd seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a wedding.
Okay. And this is your problem.
Oh, boy, this is the one that... Now, we had lots of talk about the Maelstrom in Edgar Allan Poe's story, where the people are slowly being drawn towards the center.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke about water spouts. We all knew basically what it should look like, but it was a real difficult...
Was it the timing of those two funnels, along with the live action with them?
It was just to make it look real. Now, what happened is when we shot it live, we all knew there was going to be this thing whirling in the middle. So we had an enormous amount of wind, and we picked the storyboard, it picked the angles, and that at one point that whirling thing would take him.
Mm-hmm.
And that it would go in between the camera and them. Now, this was not the part that was that difficult. This was difficult. We wanted it very red. This was, of course, symbolism of hell, basically.
Yes.
And this is fabulous.
Yes.
When it comes like you're almost above it. It was when he's standing.
And it takes him?
Yes, and it was there, but it took a very lot of passes.
But it looked
before
fine.
it looked fine. See, before the speed was wrong or the color was wrong, or it was very difficult. This is where they struggle the most, right there.
Now, is that filmed horizontally or vertically?
That was filmed horizontally, and we had tons. I mean, they were little hills and declines, but they were getting tons of dust into their eyes and their mouths. There was a lot of dust flying about.
Were there other concepts for that?
No, we toyed with a lot of things. I remember we knew that the basic concept always was of the self-sacrifice.
Right.
But when we hit about the maelstrom, then we stayed with that. First it was different. Then it was something you could believe would exist there. It also was a communication, again, between that world and the new world. And also what I liked about it was that it was periodical. You know, it's not a thread that's there all the time.
Right.
It's a thread that comes and goes, like the pendulum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. His character was always intended to be taken here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if you watch it, when he argues, when she talks him into going, he has this kind of smile.
A resolution that he
knows.
knows.
As if he knows what's going to happen.
But then there's a hint of him living on later on.
Well, it's a little bit like the Alec Guinness,
yeah.
You know, the voice in Star Wars. But that, I think, was a hint in case. But when I did it, I really did it for real, in my mind. I mean, he really sacrifices himself. And we had discussion. He asked me before, do I know or don't I know? And I said, I think you know, because I think it makes it even. But
more
I think
dramatic,
it's going to be, yeah, and it's more of a self-sacrifice. But it had to be subtle.
But it also sticks with the idea of mysticism.
Yes.
Sacrificing something to obtain something.
I am with you.
The timing was very good there, though.
God, I remember we kept yanking him. Oh, and we had nothing, you know. It's
now that's not him.
No, that was him.
That's him.
That
flying
was him
around?
at the beginning, flying around, and then I think it was on wires, blue screen, with a camera pulling away, and to make him small and slow. And after that, I think the end of it was a model.
Wow.
This is like a replay of when she's inside, you know, before she comes on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Now when she comes through the mirror.
Oh. This is blue screen. That was not her. That was a stunt.
Okay.
Coming through, and then it was her when she flies and lands.
You've had your fun, Selena. The game is finished.
Hardly. One false step, Bluebird. And even if you don't, your friends will get the point.
Hey, no!
Now the floor, when it starts moving...
That was live.
It was all mechanical.
Yeah, the floor was mechanical, and it was tricky to work on it. She practiced. And there were lights and smoke and all that, and then it was all enhanced. And then, of course, all the rest that followed. It was just, you know, we gave her directions where to look in terms of the height of the creature. And she had marks.
In the long shot, when we see this room, is it all set or is it continued with matte shot to make it extended?
I think it's all set.
Really?
It was big. Maybe it was extended in a very wide shot. Yeah, here it comes out. It. Now, the floor was not the whole room. We only did a section. Because it would have been impossible. I mean, the logistics involved were so complex.
But then again, it was enough story-wise just to do it where she was.
Supergirl above you, look out!
Now, the creature that appears,
It's behind her.
right, was that a mechanical? Or
No. That thing was so huge. That was a lot of fun.
it was just a big thing? Or
No, it was a lot of fun to do because she's so good at it.
what is it? The small thing, though, that was used, was it a mechanical thing?
Yeah,
or a
it
person?
was. There was a thing hidden behind her back, and it's a cable, and we pull her on a hydraulic ramp, basically. But the creature, that was optical effects.
Completely?
Completely. And blue screen.
You included.
There was no way we could do that live. It was so humongous. So if you'll notice at the base, that's where we had all that smoke. The minute you go up there, I did the pan up. And then you see that thing, which is a little bit like the thing out of Fantasia at the beginning. That was added afterwards. All this was done live, and we kept a lot of smoke all around at the bottom, so to have a lot of latitude, basically, of what we could do afterwards. When she's in the hand, that was all blue screen. This was shooting backwards. That was with the model. Then there was some stuff with her live in blue screen.
Which is that. Okay. And those hands are creature gloves?
Yes.
This is something that would be CGI now, of course.
Oh, for sure. And
Yeah.
you know what? I mean, you could do it better with CGI. There's no doubt about it. And it would not be so difficult and complicated.
No, it wouldn't. It would be holding her.
Yeah.
Did this stick to the script, all this?
Yes. I mean, once we started, this was the end. The end was a mano a mano conceptually from day one. Even when Superman was involved, the concept from the beginning was that at the end, she would do it alone.
And in the same manner.
We finally ended up with that. This, in a way, was poetic justice because it's a replay of what killed her mentor.
Yes.
But this time with positive force.
Well, she makes her confront herself,
Yes.
in a sense.
Now, Danny, we had a lot of discussions about whether Brenda
Did she join her in the
should
script?
join her or not about punishment. This is where we had problems right here.
This is a great shot.
But you see, in a way, she ends up being punished with Brenda a little bit. It's similar like at the end of Aladdin. You know, when the bird
Yes.
and the bad magician end up being thrown together.
Someone was inspired over this, I say then.
No. I mean, those kind of archetypes have been eternal and universal. So
We've mentioned two things there. Little Mermaid and Aladdin.
yes.
I have to go. I have to return this to where it belongs. And I must ask you all something.
It's all right, Supergirl. We never saw you.
We never even heard of you. Thank you. Ethan, Linda, she had to leave in a hurry, but she...
But Helen, I tell you, was very talented. I think she's extraordinary. This is her first picture.
Her performance is much more layered than I think people gave her credit for back then. But again, it was edited, you know.
Yes, and also it was not released properly, probably, and we missed somewhere.
Take care of yourself, kiddo.
But physically, she's perfect
She's
for the role.
lovely. She's lovely. She has a real nice, wonderful quality.
That's all model, right?
That's model. This is that was a glass mat again.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That was some kiss.
Wow. Goodbye, Linda.
Was that optical?
No, that was model put on top of that.
Live,
which
shot
means
live then.
we shot the shot without the model, and the model was added afterwards.
Okay.
This was a plate in Scotland.
That's where the thing looks almost alive and happy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we put the most light on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the lights come back, and we end the way we started. I guess I must like that, ending the way I started.
Mm-hmm. Full circle.
Full circle.
Well, the circle's perfect, right?
Right.
So all in all, looking back on this production, aside from the computers being outdated, I'd say it holds up.
I think it holds up well, too. I can see things where we struggled and that today with the technology we probably could have done better. But in terms of the style and the texture, I think we did pretty well.
Mm-hmm. It's much more layered, I think, than a lot of current films are.
It's rich.
And it has its roots in classical literature and art.
Yes. And even visually, you know, there's some Blake, John Martin, I mean...
Was it ever considered to show anything else around Argo City or anything previous to this about the space that it's in?
No, well, originally it was really like Superman. You were in the city and then this disaster happened and it was destroyed and you focused the destruction and the parents put her on this capsule and she escaped on her own to save her life. But it was so similar that at one point, first it was very complicated. And then we all said, you know, we're doing exactly the same thing again. Everybody's going to tell us we're just ripping it off.
Probably it would have been better if they had shown the destruction of Krypton with a narration, explaining something, and then showing either the major characters, just to show that the setup that Peter O'Toole was behind the saving of a portion of Krypton. Just using stock footage to explain why this is separated from Krypton, not necessarily, and then having it take off the way it did now.
Well, what we did in a way is we always assumed that this was like what the moon is to the Earth. It's a satellite.
Argo City.
Yes.
But in another dimension.
Yes. We talked a lot about inner dimension. You know, she comes out of the water. We all like that because it's different and it opens up so many possible. And at one point we did told you the idea that she comes out on a leaf and in this drop of water on a leaf. And the concept was from the beginning that she is in another dimension. We never, even in our minds, thought that this was Krypton.
Mm-hmm. So that's where it differed from, let's say, the comic book origins, which said squarely.
I mean, from day one, when I was there, it was never, this was not Krypton. It was like, this is the cousin, but she's in another dimension. It's another place. Because if it was Krypton first, how could it have survived? Then you had to get into
a long explanation.
Time parallel time. And, you know, when I arrived, I know there already had been a lot of drafts because David Odell told me, he says, look, I'm close to the end of what I can do here.
Did this ever have an overture?
No.
It was never considered?
The main title was the overture.
Yeah, well, it's long enough to be also.
I had a lot of fun doing this.
I think it shows with everybody.
Jerry Goldsmith really had a lot of fun doing it too.
Great score, really.
Oh yeah, and he loved it. He just loved the whole... You know, the Salkinds, there was a real family feel because all these people had worked together for so long.
Mm-hmm. And he quoted John Williams' score in that one segment.
Yeah.
Just a little.
So I've been fortunate. I've worked with John Williams, Hank Mancini, and Jerry Goldsmith.
John Barry.
And John Barry. Hey, not bad.
Right.
I love film scores anyhow. I really think it's an art of its own.
Well, this score supports everything from her different characters.
Oh, it was a great score.
It's reflective of every part of the film.
We used to spend a lot of time together. He came to London and we talked a lot, and he really went into it, and he did a fantastic job. He had fun.
Well, this has been great.
Well, thank you for letting me look at it again with new eyes.
In a new way, for a new format.
Yes. Thank you very much, Scott. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us.